Good morning. It's morning huddle time. Chad Prinky here, as always, along with my good friend, producer, co-host extraordinaire, Stacey
Stop.
Holden. Stacey,
Hey, how do you want us to install this water heater? And then my coworker was like, I don't know, install the water heater. Like, why are you even asking me? He's like, well, I don't know if you know, but what you designed, it can't physically fit through the front door of this building.
My class is only 40 minutes. So we have to get this done in 40 minutes. You have to clean up in 40 minutes. And then it also, when you use the miter saw, a lot of kids are scared of the miter saw, and you just see the difference in their confidence when they come in here compared to when they leave. They're excited.
Be announcing a new county that's going to join us in Maryland, so we continue to spread it. And I'll say my peers across the country are starting to take this and adopt this at their local IEC chapters.
Either AI assistant tools, you have AI master builder tools, and then you have kind of a bit of both that are 1 foot in BIM, in current processes, and 1 foot in AI.
Said, Brett, in life, opportunity meets you at your level of preparation.
She said, here's the keys, go forth and do great things.
Good morning. It is morning huddle time. Chad Prinky here alongside Stacey Holzinger, as always. Stacey, how are you today?
I'm doing good. I'm a little sunburnt from the awesome weather that we've been having here. It's like 90 degrees yesterday, but we live off a lake, so it was nice to get out the other day and just get some sun.
Two quick comments to that, Stacey. One, I think it depends on one's definition of awesome weather. 90 is brutal. Like that's just disgusting. Ugh. Yeah. So, but listen, I think I've described this before. My zone of comfort is extremely different from most other people. Like I'm totally cool with 40 degrees and up to like 74 before I start getting cranky. So I recognize that makes me an outlier, but I did enjoy the sun. That was nice. But the day before, the 58-degree weather was more my taste. That was really nice. And that was, but do you remember it was like 58 on Saturday and then 85 on Sunday?
Yes, I actually liked that. It was kind of neat, but it was a huge change in temperature in one day.
It's abnormal. Not a normal thing.
Yeah. So let's talk about your book a little bit.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. So the book is called Well Built, and it's how the top 2% of construction contractors create superior value, profits, and excellence. And it is available for pre-order on Amazon right now with an official launch of June 18th. Anybody who pre-orders now and then just shoots me a message with the proof of purchase, I'll go ahead and send you the ebook in the interim so you can get started if that's something you want to do. But the book is really about I've had this incredibly good fortune to work with some awesome contractors over the course of the past 15, 16 years. And to my count, something along the lines of 218 as of today, different contractors that I've gotten a chance to work with in various degrees of intimacy. And what I've noticed is there are some of those contractors that are just really running incredibly well-run companies. And as I kind of like sift through the commonalities between those, that's what I did whenever I sat down to write the book. I thought, if I were able to pass along the sort of the playbook for success for just playing the game at a higher level than everybody else, what would I teach people? And so it was really just, none of these are my ideas. It's all just collapsing the best stuff that I've seen, organizing it in a way that I think is digestible. And it also it's a fairly good snapshot of the type of thing that we do with our clients in our consulting business, which is we take stock of their organization in comparison to the best practices across, each of these areas that we cover in the book, and then come to them with solutions for each one of these that match up pretty closely with what we're with what I put together in the book. So obviously with a lot of customization when we're working with an individual company, but I hope it serves as something of a definitive roadmap for contractors and who are looking to win.
Now, is your voice on the audio, or do you hire?
I tried to pitch
That
that, and they were like, listen, man, it's not, your voice isn't that good. And I was like, oh, come on. I thought it was okay. And they were like, it's fine.
Well, that was a singer in a band.
Right? I was a singer. Yeah, no, it didn't work. They were there was that's partly true, but the other piece is that with the audiobook, they were like, look, man, you're not going to save any money trying to do it yourself. The reality is that the professionals do this, and they're so efficient.
Yeah.
In comparison, I was like, yeah, okay. Well, even if I would prefer my own voice on the audiobook, I'm not a great reader. So right? Like I'm not just this fluid reader that's going to read every word perfectly and that type of stuff. So I see where they're coming from with that. So no, it's not my voice, but it was really kind of cool. I got to do like 15 different people auditioned for the voiceover, fun. And I got the I sent out the top 3 that my wife and I liked best to a group of people, and we did like a vote. It was fun.
That sounds fun.
Yeah,
well, I can't wait to read it. It'll be awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited to use it as a kind of a jumping off point for a lot of our new hires that come into our company. It's kind of like, hand them this, read this many times, and this will help you to be a really effective consultant with our clients. So I'm excited about that output too. Cool. All right. Well, thank you for asking about that, Stacey. It's very nice. Sorry that I talked for like 8 minutes about it. But yeah, I'm fired up. It's been a couple of years in the making. So
you deserve it. That's a big milestone, writing a book. So
yeah. All right. Well, cool. So I want to introduce our guest for today. Our guest today is Mark Ehrlich. Mark and I got to know each other through a mutual friend named Kenny Malik. If anybody knows Kenny, Kenny's an awesome guy.
Our first Huddle guest.
Our first Huddle guest. First. That's exactly right. The first guest on the Huddle. And Kenny and I, we talk a lot. I work with Kenny's mechanical service business, and we spend a lot of time together talking about what we see in the industry and all that type of stuff. And so one of the topics that I know is near and dear to Kenny is this idea of subcontractors who are, hiring labor brokers, and those to do their labor. And those labor brokers who are 1099ing people and essentially paying them, in many cases, minimum wage or less to do the work, all because, let's be honest, that group of people is an undocumented workforce that came to the United States illegally. And that makes it extremely difficult for people who don't want to do that to be competitive. And I'm going to bring Mark on now, but this is Mark's life's work. Among other things, I'm sure, but Mark has left an incredible mark, or made an incredible impact in his career as a fellow for the Center for Labor and a Just Economy at Harvard Law School. He serves on the New England Regional Council of Carpenters up until very recently, retired on that. He's just an extremely smart guy, and the author of a book entitled The Way We Work, Restoring Dignity to Labor in the United States. I think I got that right, Mark, but you can correct that. And has done just, I think, such a fantastic job of putting a point on this issue. And Mark and I got to know each other, and we're working on a bunch of cool ideas together that I hope we get a chance to talk about today. But at the very least, I said, I'd really love to bring your message to our audience on the Morning Huddle. So, Mark, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure, Chad.
Yeah, Mark, can you tell us a little bit, just frame up, in a minute or so, your background, just to orient the audience. I tossed out a few, previous titles and roles, but I'm sure I've missed the mark to some extent in telling your story. So it'd be great if you wouldn't mind expanding on that.
Well, my age, the story is pretty long, Chad. So I started as an apprentice carpenter in 1975. Well, was working as a carpenter before I joined the union in 1975. and was an apprentice, was a journeyman, was a foreman, was a superintendent for a general contractor. And then I was not thrilled about what was happening in my local union. I ran for office, and much to my surprise and everybody else's surprise, I won. I headed up my local union. At that point, there was a restructuring of the union into these regional councils to more accurately match the way the industry was working. And ultimately, I ran for office as the head of the New England Regional Council of Carpenters, 25,000 members. I did that for 12 years. I retired about 7 years ago, and since then, I have been a fellow at the Harvard Law School Center for Labor and a Just Economy. I'm also a writer. I've written 3 books and dozens of articles, op-eds, scholarly journals, popular journals. And now I'm enjoying my semi-retirement.
Well, very good. That's and through all of that, you've also had a chance to make an impact. If I understand it right, you've had a chance to make an impact on policy and actually, help to shape some of the things that have created the kind of current labor and construction environment in the Northeast. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think it's a fair statement. When I first was the head of my local, which covered part of Boston and Cambridge, I would walk jobs, and I would walk non-union and union. My feeling is that everybody deserves to work under decent, dignified conditions. And I'm a union guy, but I also feel like that should apply to anybody who is skilled enough and talented enough to work with their tools. So I remember one day I was walking on a non-union job, and I was talking to some of the carpenters there. And the fellow told me, this funny thing happened. I've been working with this company for a few years. Up until last Friday, I was an employee, and then they told me starting Monday I was going to be an independent contractor. And I said, what? I'd never heard of such a thing. And I said, why is that happening? He says, I don't know. I'm getting paid the same hourly rate, so I don't really care. And he kind of shrugged his shoulders. So I started to look in. This is the early 90s, and I started to look into this. And I discovered that the issue of misclassification, as the term is, that is taking someone who was functioning as an employee and calling them an independent contractor, was an incredible labor cost savings advantage for a contractor in a highly competitive industry. And since we all know, your audience certainly knows that basically construction is materials and labor, and if materials cost roughly the same for everybody, and you can make a big savings on labor costs simply by calling someone who functions as an employee, calling them an independent contractor, and not paying the mandated taxes and insurance rates, you are saving potentially up to 25, 30, 35% on your labor costs. So I had no idea this was going on. I started to look into it. I realized it was a pandemic, if you want to call it that.
Right. Yeah.
Really, it started in the South and was kind of working its way up. And that became kind of the public policy issue that drove most of my career. I ended up working with the people over at Harvard to do the first study on the impact of misclassification in 2004, and realized that it wasn't just a union, non-union issue. It was really a public policy issue because of the lost tax revenues to state and federal governments, and really taxpayers were being swindled by this scam. So, and following that, I spent years engaged in lobbying, writing legislation, and being politically active to try to cut down the impact of this, what I think is a really problematic issue in our industry.
That's excellent. Thank you for both the description and for that work. I think it's helped to make the case and to actually show in a lot of markets that still suffer from. I mean, let's be honest, this is still a massive issue in the United States, but it's not as much an issue in the Northeast. And I think that's there are a bunch of contributing factors to that, but the work that you have done certainly contributed to it. So I'll first off, I want to, before I go any further, I want to correct the name of the book. Title of the book is The Way We Build. Sorry, not The Way We Work. The Way We Build: Restoring Dignity to Construction Work.
There you go.
Excellent. Thank you. Jump on Amazon and buy that, or would you have them buy it somewhere else, Mark?
The University of Illinois Press is another place. That's the publisher, and they have a website. You can buy directly from them.
Excellent. Cool. So, Mark, I am a free market guy, and I think that I'm a whole heck of a lot like most of our audience, I think, in that, and most of the people that certainly I meet in the construction industry share that desire to minimize government interference when at all humanly possible. Yet, I could not agree more with the idea that we have to make the worker misclassification something that is as close to impossible as we can for the sake of the health of the economy. And I know you share that view. And as somebody who's much more studied on this topic than I am, I'm just pissed off about it. Talk to us about why.
That's an appropriate response, Chad.
Right, it is. It feels like it. I am. It angers me. But it angers me on behalf of the people who are trying really, really hard to do things the right way. Talk about why this is such a problem, not just morally and ethically. Leave that to the side. Let's pretend I don't care morally and ethically. We can bring that back later. But why, from an economic standpoint, is worker misclassification such a problem?
Well, I would agree. We might differ somewhat on the role of government in the economy in general, but that's not really the point here. The point is that we have a wonderful industry that has, I think, been fundamentally damaged by a business model that relies on cheating. And one of the things that makes construction interesting is that it's still, even today, a pretty decentralized and highly competitive industry. And the idea of competition, of fair competition, is that everybody's playing by the same rules. Well, if you've got a football team that has 15 players as opposed to 11 playing one who has 11, it's not that's not much fun to watch. That's not really what I would call fair competition. And here you've got a situation where some people have developed a business model that allows them to, and again, this has nothing to do with the moral issues, which actually I feel quite strongly about, but they have a business model that allows them to have a competitive advantage simply by virtue of cheating and not playing by the rules. And the consequences are pretty severe and across a broad spectrum. They certainly are consequences for the workers who are not treated properly. There are consequences for the contractors who are playing by the rules, union and non-union. What I would call a category of responsible contractors. Forget the union, non-union label. Let's just call them responsible. They are working at a disadvantage because they're playing by the rules and can't compete. You've got insurance companies that are being defrauded by the premiums for workers' compensation, which, as you know, in construction are very high because of the dangers. And you've got the average American taxpayer being defrauded because you've got some people playing by the rules, paying their taxes, and you've got a whole nother swath of firms that are simply operating in the underground economy. And so I think you've got a problem with the integrity of the industry as a whole that has little to do with government regulation and union, non-union issues, and more to do, as I said, with the issue of just having an industry that's based on integrity and fair competition.
Yeah, and I think that is really when my blood starts to boil as I think about it, is that anything in our economy that we allow to persist that relies on a black market. You call it an underground economy. I'll call it a black market. I think it's the same thing. We're saying the same thing. Is that any time we become reliant on a black market, that and pull that into the mainstream, that's deeply, deeply disturbing, because black markets are synonymous with criminal activity. And no matter how you slice this, people who are participating in fueling black labor, black markets for labor, are participating in fueling criminals. That is an absolute truth. And I know that it doesn't feel that way, right? And I was actually at a really, it was a great meeting where I think it was wise and valid that kind of judgment was removed, okay, from the conversation, where people were just able to speak openly. But where one subcontractor who cheats, and it's a part of their business model, they just do, right? That's part. They actually called it innovation, and I thought, man, how right? How can we talk about? Well, we have a strategic advantage because we've innovated. If by innovating, if innovation is allowed, if we're allowed to innovate by indulging in black market activity, that seems really, really broken. And so, yeah, I wonder how.
Yeah, I mean that would be like saying that I sell watches and I'm innovating because I rip them off from back of a truck, and I can sell them cheaper than somebody else who's buying them from the manufacturer. Yeah, I mean that's innovation of a certain kind, I suppose, but it's a kind of innovation that's ultimately ruinous to our society and our economy as a whole. Again, the idea of innovation, the idea of competition. You're supposed to reward people who learn how to build a better mousetrap. You're not supposed to reward people who simply are killing the mice all the time. That's not the goal. And I think that's why the subtitle of my book is Restoring Dignity to Construction Work. I think of our industry. I love our industry. I think it's one that has a high degree of dignity, and I think some of that dignity has been robbed. You have it used to be that the so-called underground economy, black market, whatever you call them, or just a cash economy. I mean, there was always a cash economy, right? If someone came to build your deck in your backyard, you paid them in cash. Okay, we're not talking about that. We're now talking about multi-million-dollar high-rise projects. I mean, stadiums, FedEx bill, you name it, where a good third or a quarter of the workforce, or maybe even up to a half, is simply off the books. And sometimes when somebody gets injured, which happens unfortunately in construction, they don't even know who they work for. When OSHA comes around or the ambulance come, they say, "Who's your employer?" And they'll say, Juan. I mean, they simply just don't know, because it's a multi-tier system of levels of subcontractors and labor brokers that by the time you try to piece it together, you can't figure out what the relationships are. So so in terms of safety, it's an issue. In terms of how the workers are treated. And by the way, I want to be really clear. My parents were immigrants. I have no issue with immigrant workers. I welcome immigrant workers on the construction side. I just want them to be treated the same as everybody else. That's it.
So there are two. There are clearly forces at work. Who, by the way, it's a little side note. I find it humorous to even call labor brokers subcontractors. They're just not. They're just the labor force for the subcontractors who actually, and the subcontractors aren't subcontractors. They're just estimating and project management companies.
They're a hiring hall with a smartphone. Right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. But anyway, I don't want to spend any more time on that. It's just, but it is funny to me when they're like, your fourth tier sub. Yeah. Okay. Your fourth tier sub. Neat. So there are two forces that I see at work. There are clearly forces that are keeping this happening. I'm interested in your take. I have mine. We'll compare notes, but I'd like for you to go first and share, why does it persist? How does this stay a viable, how are there multi-million-dollar, hundreds of $1 million companies who have their businesses totally reliant on, this kind of model?
Well, I think it's, I think the nature of the beast is the competitive nature of the industry. And if an owner is looking at a budget and they're saying someone is going to build this building for me for $47 million, and somebody else is going to build it for 59, why on earth would I pay an extra $12 million to have the same building built? And so they don't really want to sort of go down in the weeds and break down where that $12 million premium is coming from. And it may very well be that the $12 million premium is coming from the high bidder is playing by the rules and is requiring all of their subcontractors to play by the rules. Again, I repeat, this is not an issue of union versus non-union. This is a question of responsible employers versus irresponsible employers. And if the low bidder has been able to deliver a low bid based on the use of labor brokers, multi-tier subcontractors, cash compensation, the underground economy, independent contractors, the whole panoply of all the things that are wrong with our industry. At the end of the day, the owner is the one who's making the decision about which general contractor to use, and he's going to say, I'm not a charity. I'm not going to pay the extra $12 million to simply to make my conscience feel better. I want this building done. I want to build as cheaply as possible, and I just don't want it to fall down. Beyond that, I don't really care that much. Now, I think there are owners like institutional owners like colleges and universities and hospitals and healthcare facilities that build for the long run. But we also have a lot of speculative builders, especially in the multi-unit residential market, who frankly, all they want to do is have the building stay standing as long as the warranties are there. And after that, they're going to flip the building. They don't really much care. And so for their point of view, they don't want to pay the premium. There's no advantage to paying the premium. They will take the lowest price possible. And inevitably, if you drill down to see why that price is so low, you will end up uncovering a mass of worms that are all part of the underground economy and that characterize much of our construction industry now. Obviously, that is more true in some regions than others, but it is a problem that infects the entire country.
Wow. So that the competitive nature of the beast and the owner-driven decision based on, how could you blame them, price. And when there's a price that is substantially less, it becomes really, really difficult to make a justification for why I should spend more. That makes a lot of sense why it persists in terms of decision making, but the conditions under which it continues to persist, that's interesting, right? So like if what is keeping it from being simply banned, right? What's keeping it from being completely outlawed? That's because if it were outlawed, all of a sudden that wouldn't be possible. And again, like to a certain extent, you almost can't fault the owner who looks at a $12 million difference on a $50 million building and shrugs and says, I don't get it. I don't know why I would do it. I'm sorry, but I have to think about what's best for my pocket.
Chad, when I was during my career as the leader of the Carpenters Union in New England, I would meet with owners all the time. And they would say to me, look, we've taken a whole bunch of bids, and the union bids are a little bit higher than the non-union bids. Tell me why I should spend more money to get this. And I say, well, tell me who you're getting your non-union bids from. And, everybody knows everybody in the industry, right?
Totally.
So they would tell me a name, and I would go, well, if you want to use this guy, XYZ, let me tell you what's going to happen. This is who he's going to use for drywall. This is who he's going to use for painting and taping. This is who he's going to use for X, Y, and Z. So I would go down the list, and I will say, and this is how those contractors operate. And they would look at me like, what are you talking about? And I'm just telling you, I say, I'm just telling you, this is what you're buying. All right. And they would say, well, nice talking to you. Either they would say, well, maybe let me reconsider if I was sufficiently persuasive, or they would say, well, nice talking to you, but I'm going to go with the bottom number. And I would say, well, maybe the Attorney General's office is going to end up on your job. Maybe the Department of Labor is going to end up on your job, because what you're doing is essentially subsidizing criminal activity. And sometimes that would be effective, because in the Northeast, the agencies that are responsible for enforcing those laws are, I would describe as moderately aggressive. In other parts of the country, they are simply dysfunctional. And the worry about being subject, reputational damage from being subject to criminal activity on the job, and in fact, the disruption to schedule was sometimes enough to make them reconsider what they would do. But you know, at the end of the day, it's sort of like putting your finger in a dike, and the water just comes out another hole. The enforcement agencies at the federal and state level are woefully understaffed, have been for years, and while almost all of them understand this problem and are sympathetic, they simply don't have the resources to police the industry the way that I think it needs to be done.
That's great.
And then in some parts of the country, it has become the norm. So that at that point, you know, turning the Queen Elizabeth around is not an easy thing to do if the Queen Elizabeth has been heading in one direction for some number of years.
That's right. Yep, I agree. I think that makes a lot of sense. I want to pause for a brief moment and thank the people who helped to make our the reach of our show possible, and who are really helping to grow our audience. And these are four sponsors that are all professional services companies that have a deep focus in the construction industry. The first is a bonding and insurance company called Marsh McLennan Agency. Great group of people. If you need bonding, if you need insurance of any kind, these are folks that truly understand how to meet contractors where they are. Another is a bank called Sandy Spring Bank. I'd say the same about these guys. They really do look at your financial needs as their priority and help you to build strategies to accomplish your goals. The next is Lawrence Law for every one of your from everything to basic contracts to employment law to litigation. Lawrence Law works with contractors every day. That sort of small to mid-sized contractor. It's a great fit with Lawrence Law. And then lastly is Katz Abosch, which is an accounting firm that has a group of people who do tax, audit, and fantastic business consulting to help you to make sure that your financial goals are met. So, Mark, one of the things that I look at as, kind of undergirding this whole thing is immigration. And you mentioned immigration earlier, and I'm like you. Here's the thing: the worker who is at the center of all of this is, by and large, a really good person who is trying to, make it in America, who is trying to feed their family. And folks like Kenny Malik, like we mentioned before, he loves the workforce. And I don't think I know that you echo those comments that the workforce is not the problem here. But the way that we've handled immigration, I think, is fundamentally driving why this is cheating. Because at the end of the day, reputable companies can't hire this labor force, millions of people, this labor force who is here in an undocumented way, who cannot, legally be hired. And if I'm, $100 million framing contractor, it's a reputable business, I got a really hard time hiring somebody that's illegal. So what happens? This huge workforce that we desperately need in construction ends up getting funneled into these channels where they can be hired. And that's through the labor broker system, where they are often, not always, but often exploited. Certainly there are some non-exploitative labor brokers in the United States that do a great job of fair pay for labor, and they really are like that overflow kind of like, oh man, I have too much work, I need to hire a labor broker. That's the non-union version of the hall, right? It's just, and those are reputable outfits that will pay their taxes and W-2 and all that stuff. But it doesn't change the fact that we've got this massive undocumented workforce that really doesn't have anywhere to go but the labor broker system. And I think that's why it's become the norm across so many parts of the country, is just because that's where the labor is. So what I know this is a big question, but what needs to happen to solve that problem? How can we hire these people?
I mean, this is a massive problem where there is enormous amount of emotional rhetoric that completely confuses and clouds the issue. The truth is that construction has always had an immigrant workforce, whether they came from Western Europe, Southern Europe,
Poland, eventually Ireland, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Everybody, the bricklayers were Italian, the masons were German. I mean, that's just how our industry is built. And all this is the latest iteration of the same dynamic of workers from other parts of the world coming to the United States because they want to improve their lives and being part of the construction workforce. I applaud that. I think that's a great thing. I think the industry is a really good place for people to begin to get integrated into American society and make a living and achieve the American dream. That all is good stuff. The issue is that when they're intentionally kept illegal, and I say it's intentional. People talk about the dysfunctional immigration system, and I say, whoa, wait a minute. Before you call it dysfunctional, it is functional for some people, and that's why it stays the way it is. Because this is a source of cheap labor that can't complain, that can't organize, that can't speak out because they're afraid of deportation. So you have, if you are a contractor willing to take advantage of that situation, it is ideal because you don't even bother calling them independent contractors anymore. They're just, maybe you list them as vendors, or not as a labor broker, as a vendor, but they're completely off the books. And one of the reasons the enforcement agencies have such trouble tracking this down is that there's no documentation. Everything is off the books. There's no paper trail to follow. And enforcement agencies, unfortunately, kind of have a bureaucratic, legalistic mentality. They need a paper trail in order to prosecute. And if there is no paper, there's no paper trail. So you have all of these people functioning in the shadows, and it works and the reason remains unchanged is it works to the advantage of enough people. And again, to the owners, who are kind of like the famous three monkeys who hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil, all they know is that they're getting a building built cheaply. And that's really all they care about. And they don't want to know why. And they say, if you enforce a law, the cost of the buildings are going to go up. And they, in fact, will, because if people have to actually abide by certain laws, the labor costs will rise, by a small margin. But for a lot of the people, again, I think the most egregious problem is in the multi-unit residential market. The bottom line is what drives everything. So I think until that there is a relationship between cleaning up our industry and fixing the immigration problem, and they're connected. And I don't see the political will to do that. There's a contractor in Texas named Stan Merrick, who the third generation interior systems guy, great company. They used to be union many years ago. Texas went non-union. They're now open shop. But he is absolutely committed to reforming the immigration system because he wants to play by the rules, because he believes in that. So there's a lot of people like, like that, who I think care about the integrity of the industry. Yeah. And who want to see this system change. I will tell you a funny story with respect to one of the things that we did when I was running the Carpenters Union. The largest non-union framer in New England had about maybe 300 people working for him, and he was doing wood framing, doing a lot of work. And we decided to file for an election against the company, for a union election. And one of the reasons was a lot of the workers wanted to improve the situation, but we also wanted to flush out his business model. So came time for the hearing, and he comes and he testifies. He says, well, I have no workers. I have no employees, so we can't have an election. There's nobody to vote because I don't have any employees. And the board hearing says, wait a minute, what was the volume of business that you did over the last year? And he said, well, I have 75 million. I forget the number, but a sizable number. And he says, well, who does the work? And he says, oh, I have 14 subcontractors that do all the work.
Right.
And so they're the ones that you should go after. So he gives a list and the addresses of all of the names of the contractor. The National Labor Relations Board sends out letters, and all of them are returned undeliverable. So it's sort of like, it's like these elves, these leprechauns come in at night, and build these buildings, but they're invisible. They don't exist. You can't even identify who they are, who their employers are. And, and that's an outlier, and as you said, in the Northeast. But unfortunately, that's a fairly common situation in many other parts of the country.
No, it absolutely is, and in some parts of the country, it's just the way it is, I think in the deep South, that's particularly Texas and across. But anyway, and like you said, particularly in multi-unit residential, it's so predominant. So there's so many things that we could continue to talk about. We're coming up on time. I do want to take a quick moment and make I think one comment and then bring something up that I think our audience might want to be aware of. So one thought that just we haven't talked about much, but that I'll say my piece and interested in yours, is that I think just purely from a capitalist perspective, from a financial, just making smart decisions about running your business perspective, if your entire business model is predicated on a labor force that doesn't actually work for you, there is almost nothing standing between the company that you are currently relying on for all of your labor just becoming your competition. And over time, that is exposure that I think it's just insanity. So I recognize, however, that you can't just go out and hire a whole bunch of undocumented employees if you're this reputable business. That's a very difficult challenge for you. So what I think you need to be behind is responsible contracting, and I think you need to be behind trying to help find a path forward through this by advocating and actually maybe growing your voice as it relates to driving immigration reform. I agree there isn't the will today, but I think there are enough people out there that just don't fully understand the topic as you do and as you've described it, that would be very much for getting this resolved and finding ways for us to be able to legally hire a workforce that is here illegally, and get over the fact that they're here, because they are. Right? Unless we're gonna all subscribe to put them all on trains and send them back, and let's see what happens after that. Which
nothing will get built.
Right, nothing will, and wouldn't that be a shock to the system? And all of a sudden, there'd be more powers that be who want to figure out immigration. Right, that would drive it. I think it's an inhumane step to put them on the trains and send them back, but there's something on there for in terms of adjusting people's perspective on reality, right? Because reality is, you're right, nothing would get built. So we've been kicking around this idea along with a couple other folks, Kenny Malik included, that of putting together an alliance for responsible contracting, which would be a group of contractors and owners and government entities and institutions, and just like-minded people who are interested in moving this thing forward, particularly at this moment in the Mid-Atlantic. Though I'd love to be able to bite it off larger, but we'll one step at a time. And I think again, we've been back and forth on this, kind of trying to create a vision. Talk a little bit, if you would, about what may be possible, knowing obviously that it's in purely theoretical terms right now, but what may be possible if a group of like-minded people got together and tried to press on the opposite side of this issue.
Well, I can sort of tell you just from my own experience, what we did was when we did the Harvard study in 2004 that showed that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts was losing $150 million a year every year because of misclassification in the construction industry. That woke up a lot of people in sort of political circles, and the legislature ended up passing a bill that tightened the definition of what misclassification was in 2005. And it was signed, by the way, by a Republican governor. It was a bipartisan bill, because nobody wants to say, oh yeah, I'm in favor of cheating, right? There's no lobby out there for the Association of Cheaters. that's not something that politically you want to be on that side. So I think there's a whole educational piece that has to happen, that it has to get beyond the voices of those simply who understand what's going on, and the public has to understand that that this is a public policy issue, not simply a construction issue or an industry issue. So that's the first piece. I think the second is generating political support. You've got in the enforcement side in the Mid-Atlantic, you've got actually the District of Columbia Attorney General's office has been fairly active around this set of issues. They've done a number of major cases about misclassification, and now there's a new bill that passed the Maryland legislature, and the leadership of the Department of Labor, I think, is from what I understand, is quite knowledgeable about this issue and prepared to be active. So you've got a lot of the pieces in play, and I think it is a question of bringing everybody together. And I think it's around this issue of responsible contracting is something that people can get behind, because for all the reasons that we've discussed, during this show, that it's not simply a construction issue, not a union, non-union issue, that it's an immigration issue. It's all of this stuff combined. It's about protecting the integrity of a core industry in our society. And I think that's how, if it's framed that way, I think you have a lot better chance of generating support for cracking down on the people who are, I think, degrading the industry.
Yep, I love it. I completely agree with you, and I think even those contractors who are using this model today, I know several of them who I've spoken with about this concept, and they'll acknowledge that if there was a different way to get the labor, they would welcome it. There's right, so the issue really, I mean, I think it's really important to recognize that while there may be truly some bad actors in all of this, I know there are some bad actors in all of this, but there's also a kind of survival mechanism that is kicked in for a lot of people who are not doing this because they're trying to manipulate a system, but they're doing this because this is the way the system is taken.
Exactly. I mean, Chad, I will tell you, I had, during my career, I developed very good relationships with a lot of the major general contractors in New England who do a lot of work in other parts of the country. And I won't mention any names, but they will tell me that they are very happy to work in New England where labor, where this stuff isn't being done that way. And they know what's going on their jobs in Florida, in other parts of the South, and they feel maybe helpless is the wrong word, but they feel like they are driven to accept the model because that's the way. When in Rome, you build as the Romans do.
That's right.
The same company. It's the same company. It's not like good company A, bad company B. It's the same damn company.
Totally.
And the other thing I really want to say this before we close, which is I admire and respect the workers who are coming from other countries to try to improve their lives and to help build our society. That's the tradition. The construction industry has been the pathway to the middle class for working people for a century. And I hate to see that. I just hate that's an emotional thing for me to see that change. And I welcome people from other parts of the country, from Mexico, from Central America, from Latin America, from wherever they are, from Brazil, that all they want is that same channel that the Italians and the Irish and everybody else had to get into the middle class, because they are hardworking, they care, they don't necessarily have skills because nobody invests in their training, but they work hard, and all they want is the same thing as every past generation of construction workers has wanted.
Well, thank you, Mark. I again agree. I'm confident, by the way, that if we were to spend 3 hours on a show, you and I would find plenty of things to argue about. I'm confident of that. But at the same time,
I hope so.
Right? But yeah, otherwise it'd be boring, right? But but no, there's nothing that we've talked about here today that I disagree with you on, and I think that's saying something, because I know that we fall on different ends of a political spectrum, and I think it'll be I believe that we do. I shouldn't say I know, but I think that's a testament to how much a uniting force this really could be if we can pull people together. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing your perspective, and thank you for all your great work.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks.
Stacy, that was cool. I loved it. I was that another one where you were sitting there scribbling and trying to figure out like, okay, what's this? You know, were you like Googling stuff?
It was a really good discussion. Yeah. And I could see, I mean, you could go on for that with that one. So there's a lot of hot topics in there, but
there are
good stuff.
Definitely
check out his book.
Yeah, definitely check out his book again, The Way We Build: Restoring Dignity to Construction Work. All right, Stacy, let's redirect some people to what do we have going on next week?
So we only have 3 episodes left, and then we take our summer break. But next week we have Greg Malcolm joining us. Did you get a chance to meet him yet?
Yeah, Greg. Well, I know Greg really well. Greg is the owner of Iron Shore Contracting. He has a great story of sort of how he built his company from scratch to a solid middle market company, and all of the ups and downs. And there are some downs to kind of talk about in that story that I think our audience will find inspirational of sort of a about persistence and hard work and relationships. So it'll be a great conversation with Greg.
Awesome.
And I always want to, as per usual, steer people to our website, themorninghuddleconstructionshow.com. If you're not already subscribed to our newsletter, please go ahead and subscribe. We'll get a weekly update with what happened on last week's episode, and link to sign up for this week's coming up episode, as well as all of the places where you can capture, where you can listen on your podcast platform of choice. So make sure that you're doing that as well. All right, Stacey, I think that does it.
Next week.
See you next week. Thank you.